Right. Welcome, Powerhouse members. So excited to have you all today. And anybody who's not catching this live, it will be recorded for you in waiting. We have expert psychologist, Dr. Laurie Bruce, with us today. And I'm thrilled to bring her into our community to just pour your wisdom, your love, all of your talent over us. And thank you for your time and taking and carving this time out of your day to be with us. How are you?
Absolutely. I'm doing very well. It's so good to be here. So good to see you. This just brings joy to my heart. So thank you for inviting me, as
Yeah.
always.
Oh, always open invite. And we're going to kind of hit this fast and hard today. We're going to have a hard stop. So I'm just going to get straight to the point.
Okay.
We are uncovering kind of this area that I'm finding is not that talked about. I had a client mention it and she said, I don't really feel like once you're at weight maintenance, this area is covered very well. And then there's always this big fear component that comes with weight maintenance because we got to this goal and all of a sudden it's like, what if? What if I backtrack? Am I backtracking? So I want to get to that. But before I do, I would love to hear some of your thoughts around this idea that there could be this thinking that we might need to be grieving the idea that the number on the scale will never actually stay an exact same. So I'm going to say that and also say it with like, how do we let go of this idea that there should be an ideal number?
Yes. Yes. I love that use of the word grieving. How profound and how accurate, that we have this idea, this vision, this goal in our mind. And at some point along our journey, we start to actually ask ourselves the question, is this even possible? Is this realistic? And then starting to recognize, oh my gosh, what I've been wanting and working so hard for, maybe that isn't even possible. So if you have this idea that you're going to get under a certain weight, or you have this wish or this fantasy that you're going to be at a weight and that's never going to change again, that there's no range or fluctuation in that, um, that absolutely is a grieving process of coming to recognize, yeah, that's not how bodies work. Some bodies don't want to get under a certain number that maybe in your head you feel is the number you need to be at, or even your doctor is telling you this is the number you need to be at. And bodies don't work that way where we achieve this number and then it's fixed on the scale. That isn't how it goes. We know we're always, every day, every moment of the day, fluctuating that range around which our weight is. So, this concept of grieving, how do we accept these realities? And what it really brings to mind is this concept of radical acceptance, which I think I've talked about. But if you have not heard me or others talk about this, it's a really useful skill for this area as well as all grief. That what is it that ultimately we all want is to have peace. We might think what I really want is this number on the scale. But if we dig deeper underneath that desire, no, I want to have peace. I want to feel happy. I imagine that if I get to this weight, then I'll be happy. Then I'll have peace. But really, at the end of the day, we just all want peace. So how do we get there? Radical acceptance, I think of as really the two parts. Radical meaning fully, wholly, completely, entirely. So radically, with every fiber of my being, I'm accepting my reality as it is, not as I want it to be, not as I think it should be, but as it is. And so another way to say that is I give up, I consciously, willingly give up the need for my reality to be different than it is. And this is hard. It takes a commitment and it takes a recommitment because just because maybe we have a moment of okay, I radically accept that I'm never going to be at this one number. I'm going to let go of the need to be at this one number. And then you get that, and maybe 3 seconds later, you're like, but I really want to be at that number. It's not fair that I'm not at that number. It's not right. I work so hard. And then we call what is turning the mind, it's the skill of turning the mind back towards the path of radical acceptance. We forget, we remember. We forget, we remember. So it's sort of a dual skill of recognizing that radical acceptance is where we find our peace. And just a little reminder, acceptance doesn't mean the same as I like it, I agree with it. I'm going to use the power of positive thinking to tell myself that this is for the best. It's none of those. Acceptance really is just about letting go of the fight and honoring and accepting reality, noticing and observing, and not fighting reality anymore.
That's so good. It's
So I
so
hope
good.
I hope that that's helpful because again, we can think about that for the number on the scale. We can think about that for anything that is causing us grief and pain in our lives.
No, I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I'm also, anytime you have another whole topic on it, because again, you have a podcast called From Both Sides of the Couch, which is amazing and wonderful. I will make sure these links go to places that we all have access to them. Okay. So
Great.
that would be a really good one, radical acceptance to dive into. And before we leave this, I do want to talk about what if it's something I want, but it's not a fair expectation. Like we have placed this want so strong in our life, and then we look at the circumstances around it and they don't align.
Yeah, same concept. I mean, to me, that's the exact same thing that if we want a certain goal, but our reality is saying that's not realistic. That's not possible. That's not going to happen. Or conversely, it really probably is the things that I would have to do in order to get there are not sustainable. We all can figure out a way to power through and, do that sprint where we maybe even get ourselves down to a certain weight. And for a moment, we have this joy of, aha, I did it. I did it. I haven't been at this weight since, 19, whatever. But the question is that sustainable? Probably not. We cannot sprint indefinitely. So recognizing to ourselves, that's not possible for me to achieve and stay at that number on the scale and recognize that's not my reality. Again, that's a grieving process. Okay. I have to let go of that. I have to let go of that need. How do I do that? Can I find something that is more sustainable? And as we talk a little bit about motivations and what motivates us in the long run, we'll expand more on that. But really, it is about shifting our expectations to something that is obtainable, is realistic, is safe, is healthy, and is sustainable for the long run.
I just want to layer onto this because I think individuals see somebody else's circumstances and be like, well, of course, while they're going through this, we'll just keep using that word grief. While they're going through this season of grief, it's probably not available to have all this high motivation to be at the gym and do all of this. It can look like anyone's current circumstances. It could be that you're caretaking on both sides. You've got kids and you've got parents. It could be that your job's chaotic. I think I had a tea bag this morning that I just taped on my notebook because I'm like, the unknown is where all outcomes are possible. Enter it with grace. And I think this
Mhm.
area of weight is an unknown. We don't know what that season or circumstance of life is going to provide for us in the sense of what we're capable of putting out into the world.
Yes, 100%. I love that little tea bag. I love that. Um, and to add on to that, yes, so much of this, our weight is affected by our stress. It's affected by all of these external things. And of course, by our biology. Our bodies are always changing, like I'm in menopause right now. And so the things that I used to be able to do, I have to work harder now as my hormone levels are changing. And so, yes, there are both all of the external stressors as well as internal biological changes that are unknown to us.
And so we have to gracefully enter and take it day by
Gracefully
day.
enter. That's right. With
Mhm.
with compassion
Yes.
and self-care. Yes.
Yes, thank you. That was so all beautifully stated and said. So this is going to take us into, I had a client the other day who was going, and this made me instantly reach out to you, Lori, is I'm terrified, and I know that other people feel this way. If anyone has had significant, or it doesn't even have to be significant weight loss, but then they see themselves kind of in this vulnerable, I've never lived maintenance before. I don't know how to do this. And I'm terrified that what if I gain it back? Um, so yeah, I feel like we saw that in our weight loss center too, that
Mhm.
feeling of when something comes, a weight loss, we'll say at the moment comes to a complete or utter stop. How do we navigate through our thoughts of like, this can be normal, this can be versus our brain immediately going, here you go,
Yeah.
here's your fall off, this is where you fail.
Yep.
Right, I'll
Yep.
shush.
Absolutely. So there are several layers to this. I'm going to start with the broadest layer, which is just anxiety in general. And anxiety, what you're talking about is fear of something bad happening. That's fear, that's anxiety. Anxiety is almost always our mind is looking into the future. Okay, what I like to tell my clients is anxiety is our mind going into the future, depression is our mind going into the past. So, whenever we are feeling anxious or fearful, what if is a very common thought associated with anxiety. That means that our mind is creating scary stories about the unknown in the future. And so, part of what we really want to do, whether it's weight loss or any anxiety that we're having, and a lot of people are holding a lot of anxiety right now in this very charged climate, um, is that we want to try to turn our mind back to the present, the right now. And some of this is about letting go of needs for control of the future. A lot of our perfectionistic, over controlling types of thoughts lead to anxiety because we can't control the unknown. So, what we're trying to do is lean into letting go of the need to control, letting go of the need to predict and to know, and gracefully entering the unknown. So that would be like the first thing about anxiety in general. The second thing I would say in terms of specifics about fear of weight regain, what one of the things I encourage my clients to do is to actually, for a moment, sit with the catastrophe. Okay, let's just for a moment catastrophize. You gain every single pound, every single ounce, or even worse, what's the catastrophe? I regain more plus some, which is what often happens when we're doing yo-yo dieting. Let's sit with that catastrophe for a moment. Why would that be so awful? Why would that be so terrible? And giving yourself some space to really feel that. And then ask ourselves, could I imagine coping well? How would I cope with that? How would I handle the worst case scenario? Okay, well, I guess I would have to buy all new clothes. Yep, yep, you sure would. What else? Well, I might have to go back on my blood pressure medication. Okay, yep, yep, you might. I would feel ashamed. I would feel guilty. I would feel embarrassed. Okay, yeah, let's just notice that. Let's sit with and be present with those feelings of guilt and shame and embarrassment. Can you imagine surviving that? Can you imagine coping with that? Well, yeah, I've done it my whole life. Okay. So let's just remember that no matter, even if the worst case scenario happens, you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. And so I think some of that is I do that intentionally to help people self-regulate again. Okay, I'm all right. And then what I really try to do is to go into things about worth, our worthiness and value, because so much of us attach our sense of self-worth to our body image, to our weight, to appearance, other people's judgments, and really help people reconnect to the fact that our worth, our value, our inherent goodness never changes. Doesn't matter if the number on the scale is 3 times what you think it should be, your worth never changes. We're born worthy, we die worthy. All of these things that we're doing, ultimately, now we're getting into this motivation piece is weight loss is about health. How can we return to reminding ourselves, because we forget, that the ultimate goal is being as healthy as we can be so that we can have our energy, have our strength, have better sleep, have better numbers, for whatever that means, be on fewer meds. And that it's not about our worth as a human being, because that is untouchable.
So with that, if somebody is really struggling to disconnect worth
Mhm.
and weight, this is therapy work, yes?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Because usually I find that the folks who are exceedingly anxious, preoccupied with a number, that they have to be on that number. If I can't be on this number, it's like the world is ending. If we dig a little deeper, not usually, it's never about the number on the scale. It's about some internal feeling of not enoughness that we imagine the scale is going to give us. If I don't feel enough right now, but I get to that number, then I'll be enough. And it's false. It's a myth. It's just not true.
So this is kind of an interesting segue too, because there is a piece with the weight loss that brings the external compliments to, and if we care what other people think, that is definitely driving the weight loss. And then what the specific person had said was she was like, so now that I'm kind of where I want to be, those compliments go away. The
Yeah.
external accolades go away. And then it's like, how do we build the intrinsic to trump what or take, over that space that the external was providing?
Yes, yes. So first of all, I just want to normalize that it feels good to have people notice. It feels good to have people say, "Oh, you're looking fabulous." Okay? That feels good and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? So there's no need to feel guilty that it feels good when people give you accolades and praise. It always feels good. So I want to normalize that. The where it starts to become dysfunctional is if we feel we have to have that in order to feel okay. We need that external reminder. If it feels like, we don't feel we're enough unless we're getting those external accolades. If we become dependent on them, we crave them, and we don't have anything else to motivate us or support us. That's where it starts to become dysfunctional. In and of itself, it's not problematic to feel good when people give us external praise. Where we really want to focus on is, okay, I think of it as like the icing on the cake. Okay. It can't be what drives you, because it does end. It does end. Eventually people get used to how you look and they don't compliment you anymore. So that can't be our driver. We have to get reconnected with, why did I do this in the first place? And the deeper things, such as sleep, energy, health, reduction of physical pain, reduction of being on all these medications, those are internal. feelings that we have as a result of getting our body healthier. And we sometimes forget when we're getting all this external stuff, we sometimes forget that, okay, that's not really why I did it in the first place. And these are the things that are most important. So we have to reconnect our why, basically.
That's amazing. I just wrote that down and circled it. And I was thinking, what are some of your go-to recommendations with your patients and clients to keep reconnecting and visually seeing, like, I care, this matters?
Yes. So I'm a huge proponent of the visual representation. So writing out your whys. Why am I doing this? Journaling it out, and having that accessible to you as a visual cue and a visual reminder of why we're actually doing this. Because when we kind of get up in our own minds, it's a lot easier to forget. So we can do things like writing out the words or also using images. What represents to you strength? It would be an image of this huge bodybuilder. And it's not that necessarily you want to look like that, but you want to have that visual reminder that I like my body feeling strong. I like being able to walk up a set of stairs and not being out of breath. What is the visual representation to you of not being in pain? Maybe that's going to be the picture of an ocean. It doesn't even have to be a physical body, but I believe that having those visual cues and reminders of what it means to you to have this internal motivation to stick to it. What's my internal why? And then I also love the use of mantras, a statement or a sentence that we can go back to keep us connected to our why.
Mm. Like, I am enough. Do you have a couple quick examples that you
Yeah.
could rattle
Yeah.
off?
I am enough. I am strong. I'm brave. The ones about my worth. I'm worthy no matter what. That's probably the strongest one for me that I use. I am worthy no matter what.
Thank you. So good. So good. Okay. And then I want to feed this into the fear piece for a moment because I know both of us have witnessed, again, like once fear kicks in,
Hmm.
I feel like what I witness out of clients is that then we start self sabotaging through the thoughts of, is this really even working? Is it working how it should be working? And then if it doesn't feel like it's working how it should be because we're not sure anymore, then we kind of get into that screw it mentality of like, are all these efforts even worth it? How do you kind of rein somebody back in and go, okay, hang on.
Hang on, hang on.
Yeah.
Yeah. The um I th I think the basic philosophy that when I eat when I'm hungry, I stop when I'm full, I reduce the stress eating or emotional eating, when I move my body consistently in a way that feels good, when I make food choices that have balance, variety, and moderation, like we have to really believe that philosophy. That's sort of first and foremost. You have to take ownership of that philosophy that dieting doesn't work. It will never work. Dieting will never work. And so, if you are dieting in order to get to a certain goal, and then you're afraid that you're going to regain it, that's based on life experience. Yes, you will regain it. If what got you there is dieting, it is not sustainable. So I would say that would be something to make sure that at your core, you really are not dieting, but you're living a healthy, sustainable lifestyle. And when you can rest in that, I can rest in the fact that I'm really working on eating when I'm hungry, stopping when I'm content, making sure that I have a variety of healthy choices, and I'm moving my body in a way that feels good, then I will naturally get to the weight that I am supposed to be at. It may not be that number you want. It may not be that number your doctor wants, but you can and will. So to me, that's really a huge component of reducing that anxiety is trusting that intuitive process.
And what is your talk around when people see the old habits, their old things that they thought that they kind of let go of and figured out, and then all of a sudden a circumstance brings it back? Sometimes it's binging, sometimes it can just be like a loss of control over too many sweets being around the house. Like, name your poison, everybody. We all
Yes.
probably have our own thing, but we go, oh, this is the old me creeping back in.
Yes.
And I thought I
Yes.
was over this.
Yeah, so that's mindfulness is the awareness of something without judgment. We can't change what we're not aware of. So to become aware, oh yeah, that's my dieting mentality. That's my old diet mentality that has never served me well. Turning the mind, what do I need to reconnect with? I need to reconnect with any of those things that you said, and I always tell people to just pick one. If we've totally gone off the rails and we're binging and our cabinet's full of this and we haven't, exercised or moved our body for months, and then we have this awareness, oh my gosh, um, I the first thing we do is try to get rid of everything. This is that all or nothing thinking of, okay, I'm going to throw everything out of my pantry and I'm going to buy these shakes and I'm going to go down to 800 calories a day and I'm going to join the gym and I'm going to go there 7 days a week. Like that's typically what we do when we've gone off the rails. And what I really encourage people is to, okay, pick one problematic area, and we're going to work on these each one at a time till we get back into that synchrony of health. That our goal is not about weight loss. It's not about the number on the scale. It's about getting ourselves feeling in charge of our choices and our body, not in control, but in charge. And that trusting in the process that the number on the scale will get to where it is supposed to be when we do that.
Yeah, that's interesting that you just separated out in charge versus in control.
Yes.
It's like such a fine line, and yet it makes all the difference,
It
right?
really does. Being the need to be in control is what promotes the yo-yo dieting cycle of restriction and then overeating, restriction and then overeating. The needs for control, we can only be in control for so long before then either we rebel or we get exhausted and then we just lose all control. And so it's really important from just a cognitive perspective instead to use words like I'm in charge, I make decisions. It's not a have to, it's a want to. I can never be in control of all of the variables that lead to where my body is going to wind up, but I am in charge of some of those variables. And I'll radically accept the things that are out of my control, and I will maintain being in charge of the things that are in my control. Very different than saying I got to control everything.
It is. It is. And if I'm hearing you right, there's just this comfort and we take that mindfulness and we acknowledge that something's happening. We're not supposed to put our head in the sand and be an ostrich.
Yep.
And then once we acknowledge it, we don't have to fix it all. We just need to remind ourselves to come back to those gentle habits that have worked for
Yes.
us in the past. Okay.
Yes, we forget, and that's a normal process. We forget, we remind, we forget, we remind. And I would say the most crucial part is that when we do come back to awareness, that we do it with self-compassion. Because typically what happens is when we come back to awareness, the overachievers amongst us immediately go into guilt and shame. How did I forget? How did I let it get so bad? What's the matter with me? I'm a terrible person. I'm weak. I'm bad, blah, blah, blah. And that's fuels, the shame and the guilt, beating ourselves up only fuels that cycle. And so when we have awareness, the most essential component is to respond with self-compassion. Yeah, this is what I do. This is what everybody does. I'm no different. I'm no worse. I'm no better. I'm just like everyone else. This is what all people do. And thank goodness that I'm alive and allowed. So far, the universe has allowed me to be here to continue on this journey and to learn every single time this happens.
No, that's so good. Yes, it's the whole you can't hate yourself into loving yourself, and you can't hate yourself into ultimate weight loss success because
Exactly.
it
It's
comes with the grace.
never going to
Yes.
work. Yes.
Never going to work. Can you give us some of the thoughts, like what's happening behind the thoughts of, you know, how sometimes when people have fallen off track, it feels like this has been happening for months. Oh my gosh, I'm never going to get back on track. And then within a couple days, maybe a couple things realign, and then we feel like we're way back on track. Everything's good. Like, where is our brain going with that, that we're so polar opposite ends of the
Yeah.
spectrum?
In the type 2, which is called DBT or dialectical behavior therapy, that state um, of emotionality. We call it emotion mind. When we are in emotion mind, our logic is gone. We're not able to access any of our reasoning, our rational, our logic. It feels horrible. So it is horrible. It feels horrible. So I am horrible. That's what we call emotion mind. And typically, emotion mind, fortunately, doesn't last. Sometimes it can last for 5 minutes, sometimes it could last for a few days. But typically, at some point, some of our logic is going to start coming back in. If you've been in therapy, then your therapist is going to encourage you and challenge you to bring back some of that logic. Okay, now let's just wait a minute here. And so then we start to have some openness to questioning. And the goal is that we don't respond from one extreme to the other. So if you recognize, oh my gosh, everything's been out of control, the goal is not to respond with, I need to get everything back in control. Ultimately, what we're trying to find is this healthy middle, which we call wise mind. What is my inner wisdom telling me about what is healthy and good for me? If we go into that logical, I get 800 calories a day, blah, 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 restriction mentality, we're not listening to our wise mind, which knows you've done this freaking, 800 times in your life. You know this isn't going to work. Please don't do it. If we pause and listen, our inner wisdom will tell us that ain't gonna work, sister. We got to find something different. But that's scary. That's a scary thought of, oh my gosh, I really do have to let go. I have to grieve that I'm not actually in control. I think I am, but I'm not. And I have to grieve and radically accept I'm not in control of this. I'm not in control of the number on the scale. The only thing I'm in control of are the behaviors that can help me to get healthier, mind and body and spirit.
Mm. This is so good. We're gonna wrap up with that because I feel like this has been such a nice taste for everybody. You and I could do 20 more episodes together with all of these topics, splitting them apart. But thank you. Beautifully said. We just again so appreciate you. Is there any last minute wrap your arms around our community, words of wisdom, like if you heard nothing else, hear this for us?
If you heard nothing else, I want you to know you were born worthy, you will die worthy, and nothing in the middle will ever make that change. And we are here for as long as we are here. And while we are here, please learn to love yourself. Learn to love yourself exactly as you are, because you are perfect. We are all perfect. And yeah, self-compassion, love yourself just as exactly as you are.